Hi, it's Terry here, sharing another process video for Peartree Cutfiles. Today I'm using the Taken Elfie cut file that was from the December release. It's such a fun cut file, so I've cut it out of white cardstock and chosen this photo of me with a Snapchat filter. I'm going to use both patterned paper and some festive coloured cardstock for my cut file. I want to use this red for the title, the Taken Elfie, but you'll see shortly that I do actually decide that I don't want it to be completely plain, because that's quite a bold blocky colour, as I want it to have a bit of a pattern to it. So I've just roughly cut it out so that I know the size that it's going to be, and then I've pulled out this Tim Holtz stamp set from a few years ago, and it's all like postmarks and festive stamps. So I'm using a Distress Oxide in Lucky Clover, which is like a kind of a Christmassy green, and I'm using that to stamp different pieces all over the cardstock. So it's difficult to see in the video, and to be honest, actually it didn't photograph very well, but basically I've created my own kind of patterned paper collage where I've just stamped all over that card. I've left it to one side to dry whilst I back my elf with his camera, and I've simply done this by drawing around each individual item and then cutting out and sticking down with wet glue. I'm using a mix of patterned papers from the Hey Santa collection and just those cardstock pieces that you can see on the right hand side. So now I'm going to cut out a circle to go in the centre of that camera, and you'll see that what I actually do is I glue only half of it down because I want the bottom half to be open so that I can slip my photo in, so it looks like it's popping out of the camera when everything's backed. So there you can see my photo just tucks in under that little lip, and now I'm bringing back that cardstock that I stamped earlier and I'm just cutting out the letters that I drew round. I am doing this in almost one piece. I just find it a little bit easier than trying to stick down all the individual letters, although I think a couple of them at the end are in a separate piece just because of how the cut file is. And because I draw around both the outer and the inner lines, it makes it easier to cut out because I know exactly where I need to cut. So it's just a case, I'm backing it flush with wet glue, not adding too much depth this time. Sometimes I'll use foam pads to add a bit more definition, but I want it to sit flat to my layout. So these are the main items of my layout, the main design. but I want to add some colour to the background. So I've pulled out the Lucky Clover Distress Oxide that I used for stamping, and then also this red, which I think is Candy Apple. So I'm just adding that on with a sponge blending tool, being a little bit careful not to overlap them too much, as brown will be created if you mix the red and the green together. Adding some droplets of water with a spray bottle and then just rolling it off, so you get kind of that like spotty effect, which is similar to the effect that's on my photo. So it was a Snapchat filter with the funky hat and teeth, but it also had some kind of like snowy bits to it, so I thought I'd replicate that. Now I'm just adding some pom-pom trim to the bottom of that camera, and a big pom-pom to his hat. So a little tip there that I used to use when I was card making is that if you've got something that's individual that you want to stick, but you'd have to sit there and hold it, is I use a peg that I would normally use for hanging clothes on the line, and I just peg it on and then leave it for a while. So I'm going to use these acrylic gonks, gnomes, whatever you want to call them, from Bramble Fox as part of my design, and I've added some stitching at the bottom with my machine in red to just create a bit of a shelf almost, so that it didn't feel too much like everything was floating. It's not going to sit perfectly on top, but I just wanted it to give a bit of a kind of shelf for things to be above. So I'm just adding some embellishment. I've pulled out this Merry Christmas from the Hip Kit Club ephemera pack, and I really want to use this Funky Santa, but it doesn't quite fit in. He's just a little bit too big and not quite what I want. So I've added in those acrylic gnomes, a little candy cane, and then I'm using these kind of stars in gold that have come from one of the thicker sheets from a few years ago. So I've just added them around the page, and I'm using that gap in the cut file between the Take and Elfie to add my journaling. And now I'm just adding some gold glitter glue in dots to kind of look a little bit like sparkles coming out of those stars. And there we have my finished layout.